and those that could still develop. Marcus Rashford is heavily criticised by a former Manchester United and England forward. We'll assess what's next for the 5 players hoping to exit Old Trafford this summer. Ipswich have dropped out of the Premier League, but Amari Hutchinson might yet get to stay in the top league. We'll reveal who's after him and why the deal has run into problems. And Leeds are back in the big time and making moves. We'll bring you news from all top 20 top flights clubs as they step up their pre-season work. Yeah, lots to come, but let's start with the 2 strikers whose futures appear to be intrinsically linked, or are they? OK, so we have to start with today's developments on Hugo Ekitike. Mark, just bring us right up to date with where we're at.
First things first, when you look at Alexander Isak and Hugo Ekitike, the important thing to point out, any potential deal would be a Liverpool club record, a Newcastle club record, and a Premier League club record.
Wow.
And when you talk big money, they're complicated deals to make happen. So that's why the last 24 hours has been quite intense for those fans, those people connected to the 2 clubs, and of course the 2 players and their representatives. Now, we start off with where we're at with regards to Hugo Ekitike. This is something we were saying yesterday on Sky Sports News, that there was an interest from Liverpool in the player. Today, we furthered that by saying Liverpool have opened talks with Eintracht Frankfurt over a potential deal for the 23-year-old. We know they've been keen on him for some time, as have Newcastle. They failed in an attempt to try and sign him before he joined PSG in the summer of 2022. Liverpool have made no formal offer at this stage, but we know negotiations are continuing between the 2 clubs. Someone that had an incredible season for Eintracht Frankfurt last season. He got 15 goals in the league with 8 assists. He was great in the Europa League as well with 7 goals and assists, and the same in the German Cup, 4 goals and assists. So he's generating big numbers, hence why there's interest from 2 of the elite Premier League sides. The backdrop to this is on Tuesday, Newcastle put their first bid in for Hugo Ekitike. That also happened to be around the time that Liverpool made an inquiry to Newcastle. Alexander Isak, is he potentially for sale? And Newcastle made it very clear, Isak not for sale under any circumstances. And then Liverpool said, OK, thank you very much. We're going to move on to another target, which, by the way, happens to be someone that you're very interested in, Hugo Ekitike.
Brilliant. I feel like it's rare that we see football transfer strategy so played out just so clearly in the public like this, Dams. But it seems like Liverpool are in the stronger position of the 2 clubs here. Is that right? How would you see it?
This is really interesting to me, how these 2 potential transfers are playing out. Mark explained it really well there. But if you look at it, if we just take this on face value, first of all, Alexander Isak is of interest to Liverpool. Newcastle United have said Alexander Isak is not for sale. Hugo Ekitike is a player that Liverpool and Newcastle United are both interested in. So on face value, fine. That's the story. We don't need to worry about Isak anymore because he's not for sale, so clearly that story's gone.
Every player's for sale, aren't they?
But we do know that when a club is interested in a player, now we do this every single time during a transfer window, then somewhere along the line, there must have been some sort of encouragement that is the player open to the move? Have the club made it clear that maybe if the price is right, we would be prepared to do business on this particular player? I'm not saying that's happened in this case, but usually if a club approaches another club, it is because somewhere along the line there has been some sort of encouragement. Newcastle United, let's make it clear, they hold the cards here. Alexander Isak has got 3 years left on his contract. They don't have to sell. They've got a player under contract, they're paying him good money. He hasn't gone physically up to Newcastle United and said, look, I want to go. And even if he did, Newcastle United don't have to do anything because he's under contract. But this interest in Isak and the subsequent noise around Ekitike poses the question, is there more to these 2 deals than meets the eye? Newcastle, as Mark said, have had a £70 million bid rejected for Ekitike. Do they want him to play alongside Isak next season, or is he looked at as a replacement for Isak either next season or further along the line, maybe next summer, if Isak is eventually to leave Newcastle United. Liverpool, as Mark mentioned, conveniently now are interested in Hugo Ekitike as well. They are told by Newcastle Isak's not for sale and they're now pursuing Newcastle's #1 target. Coincidence? Maybe. Face value? Yes. Otherwise, the cynic in every one of us thinks something else is going on here. There are so many questions to answer around this, not least if Newcastle United break their own transfer record, which they would have to do to get Hugo Ekitike in. Is that the end of their possible spending during this transfer window? Because we've been told throughout this summer's window, they're after a goalkeeper and they're after a central defender. If they bring in Hugo Ekitike, can they bring in those two players? Possibly not. But could they bring in those two players if they were to make a sale in this transfer window? And the biggest sale that they could make in this transfer window is a certain Alexander Isak.
But they do have until June next year, the end of June next year, to make a sale. So therefore, they could do what a lot of clubs do, is they say, right, let's get the player in now, but we know within the next 11 and a bit months, we're going to have to make a sale to meet our PSR requirements. So therefore, you get the player in and we'll worry about generating some money down the line. And that's what they possibly could think. So a lot of Newcastle fans will say, well, I'm a bit concerned we're going to put all our financial eggs in one basket. Where does that leave us? Like Dharmesh says, we wanted a goalkeeper. We've been linked with James Trafford. They've attempted to try and get a deal over the line there. They also have been linked with centre-backs in the last 12 months. Mark Gay was of interest this time last year. We need to strengthen the squad. We've got a Champions League campaign. Do we want to put ourselves in a vulnerable position where actually we've got two outstanding signings in Hugo Ekitike, should they get a deal done, and Anthony Elanga, but we need strength in other areas. I get the feeling they might still be looking at targeting those positions as well. They may just have to tweak what they do financially, but Eddie Howe very much wants to strengthen the squad in those areas as well as the deals that they're looking to do at the moment.
The scenarios that Newcastle United are looking at in this transfer window, there's probably a dream scenario. The dream scenario is Hugo Ekitike comes to St James's Park and he plays alongside Alexander Isak next season, and maybe they can generate money in other areas and still go into the market and bring in a goalkeeper and a central defender, because let's be honest, they're fighting on 4 fronts next season.
Generate money, you mean by making sales, or?
Potentially by making sales, yes, but not necessarily the biggest sale that everyone is talking about in Isak, because the dream scenario would be Isak and Ekitike playing alongside each other at St James's Park next season. This is a player, as Mark was mentioning, he mentioned it to me off air before, it's not someone that's just come along in this transfer window, Ekitike. They've been tracking Ekitike for quite a while now.
For a couple of seasons, haven't they?
So it's not something that's just cracked up on everybody that their interest in Ekitike. The mid scenario would probably be Ekitike doesn't come to Newcastle United, but they keep Alexander Isak. If Newcastle fans were given the choice, it's going to be one or the other, they would probably lean towards, would you agree, Alexander Isak staying at the club and not signing Hugo Ekitike. The nightmare scenario, Newcastle United fans probably don't want to hear this, is Hugo Ekitike doesn't come to Newcastle United and Alexander Isak leaves Newcastle United. And then you've got a really nightmare scenario where who's going to be playing for Newcastle United up front next season. But that is something that looks very, very, very unlikely at this stage. But it is clear that there is noise around Alexander Isak, as much as Newcastle United fans don't want to hear it, because we do know that Liverpool are interested in the player, but there's also huge noise around Hugo Ekitike as well. But there are 2 clubs who are very interested in him. Eintracht Frankfurt have already rejected 1 bid for him. Is that partly on the say-so of Ekitike and the fee, or has Ekitike kind of made his mind up as well where he wants to go?
Yeah, there's about 3 things that came to mind while you were talking there. One thing that Newcastle could do is something they've done in the past. They could sign a goalkeeper on loan with an obligation that kicks in the next financial year. That's something they've done before. That's something that other clubs also do. They could also say Alexander Isak, right, not for sale. However, they may privately say, if we can get through the summer and convince him that his future is at Newcastle, he could sign a new contract over the course of the next 12 months, which would change the dynamic next summer. And there was one other point which I was going to say, and I can't remember it because we've been chatting, but there are little things that can shift and change the dynamic of these deals, these relationships with the players, and what might happen. My gut feeling at the moment is that Hugo Ekitike is headed to Liverpool. I feel like the deal for him to go to Newcastle is unlikely at this stage, but things change in football like that. One phone call and suddenly everything shifts. And I think the point I was going to make as well is that we cover every inch of transfers where possible, and at Sky Sports News we try and be as accurate as we possibly can with the information we have with our sources. Sometimes there can be a lot of noise around a certain thing happening, but it doesn't mean it's true. And sometimes agents and clubs can use the media and use social media as a powerful tool for them to generate noise where everyone thinks, this is happening, but actually the club's going, right, while all that noise is over there and you're all looking at that, we're just going to go about our business quietly round the back and get this done. And sometimes that's a big factor in transfers. So whilst everyone's talking about Newcastle and Hugo Ekitike, could Liverpool be saying, OK, no worries, we like that noise because that means we can operate quickly and quietly in the background.
I think one person who is in a fantastic position is Alexander Isak. He's got 3 years left on a lucrative contract at Newcastle United. He's going to be playing Champions League football next season with Newcastle United. The champions of England are interested in signing him. Newcastle United, with all of that noise going on at the moment, will want to tie him down to a new contract. That new contract will be better than the one he's got at the moment, will be more lucrative than the one he's got at the moment. So Alexander Isak, he's in an absolutely fantastic position, but he has earned that position because he's been so fantastically good for Newcastle United.
And the fans love him.
Yeah,
and playing at St James's Park and being in that city where you are absolutely adored as the King of Kings is a great place to be. Just to flip side what Dharmesh has said there, because this is quite an open dialogue and we don't really have a script in this part of the show because we're just chatting. But in 12 months' time, the whole landscape of what football clubs are looking for in the market could change. Right? We know that Arsenal are looking for a striker at the moment, close to Victor Gyökeres. We know that Liverpool are in the market for a striker, close to potentially Hugo Ekitike. They've opened talks. You know, this time in 12 months, are Arsenal looking for a striker? Probably not. Are Liverpool looking for a striker? Probably not. Erling Haaland signed a long-term deal at Manchester City. We know that Chelsea have been in the market and got strikers in this window. So where is a likely destination should Alexander Isak be in the market and available this time next year? He might be thinking, actually, I'm going to stay at Newcastle. I'm going to create history. I'm going to be a part of this exciting project because I believe this is where my future lies.
It's intriguing, isn't it? We'll be keeping our eyes peeled to see how this